Hey guys, Mo here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Gamesir X2 USB-C version. And at this point I'm sure most of you have heard about this controller, as it does have a bit of a backstory with the sketchy Nintendo Switch emulation DRM and that whole thing, but supposedly this is a solid controller outside of that. And after being on the fence about it for a few months, I finally pulled the trigger and wanted to share my thoughts on it, as well as compare it to some of the other controllers I use regularly for mobile gaming and emulation. You know, the market is flooded with options, including different options from like MOGA and 8BitDo, the dozens of clip controller options you have, as well as the Razer Kishi, which I'll leave a link for my review of that down in the description below. But if you're using it for emulation, game streaming, native Android or iOS gaming, any of these options will work in most of the situations, but in my opinion, there isn't a perfect one-size-fits-all solution for every situation. So today we'll take a look at the X2 and discuss what it does great, what it doesn't, the overall build quality of the device, and hopefully to help you decide if this is a controller for you, or maybe your use case wouldn't be right for this controller. Let's get into it. So if I can beg for just a moment, don't forget to like and subscribe, guys, and if you hit the notification bell, I'll give you $1. With that out of the way, guys, for today's video I'll be using this Xiaomi Mi 9, specs listed here, and it is flashed with a custom Pixel UI ROM to give it a more stock Android feel. So I purchased the X2 on Amazon, non-affiliate, link in the description, and my first reaction to it was just how cheap the plastic feels. With the exception of some very sturdy feeling rubber on the device, it is made of a very cheap feeling plastic. But at the same time, while it does bend and creak a little bit, I don't feel like you would be able to break it without excessive force. So the controller has all the buttons you expect on a controller, a very clicky D-pad on the left side, and joysticks. There is a rubber piece in the middle to help keep your phone in place. It's very tactile, sticky. On the right side, you do have your ABXY button and a right joystick. There's a home button, a screenshot button too, weirdly enough. There's your G and select button, as well as your start button. It does have some very, all the buttons are pretty clicky for that matter, but the shoulder buttons, especially your L and R buttons, are super clicky, so you'll always know when something's been actuated. I will say that the lack of analog triggers is kind of disappointing, and it kind of minimizes what you can use the controller for. On the back side, you do have these rubber handles as well as some ergonomics going on there, which does make it more comfortable during longer gaming sessions. So as you may have noticed, this is a telescopic controller, so it does fit phones up to 173 millimeters or 6.8 inches. It does have a USB-C plug here that does articulate up and down to make it a little bit easier for you to plug it in when you're stretching the back end of the controller out to slide the controller in. And there is a USB pass-through here, but it's a select list of phones listed here that it does support. But your mileage may vary, because I was able to use it with a phone that wasn't listed here, being the Samsung Galaxy S20, and it charged with no problem, but it was a slower charge. Now, getting the phone in is simple enough as described here. You kind of just slide it into place like this. There's probably more than one way to skin this cat, but this is the way that I find easiest, by starting with the top of the phone going in first and using that top end to push it in. Once it is in, it is a snug fit. The combination of that rubber inside and the pressure from the controller do make me feel like you could probably even drop this, and the odds of it falling out are slim to none. Now, getting into use cases, I do feel like they kind of dropped the ball here with not adding analog triggers to the controller. If you're going to be using this for GameCube emulation, this is not going to be the controller for you. It does not have those analog triggers that so many of the GameCube games like Super Mario, Sunshine, Metroid Prime, Luigi's Mansion, those games that do take advantage of the analog triggers are not going to work properly with this controller. That being said, you can use it, it's just you're not going to get the full effect of those analog triggers on the controller. In addition to that, I do find that I had some issues getting it to work properly with Xbox Game Pass, where the A and B buttons were swapped. Even though I did go in and swap them inside of the app for the controller, for some reason it just didn't register. So A and B were swapped. I'm using the Xbox Game Pass app. Speaking of the app, I wasn't really a fan of having to download it, because it does ask for permissions to your location and storage, which I don't really understand why it necessarily needs access to your location. I guess I can understand storage somewhat, but it needing access to your location just seemed kind of weird. But you can get rid of the app once you have it set up to the way you want. You only really need it if you're going to be switching the A and B buttons, or if you're going to be using it for games like Genshin or Call of Duty where you want to use a controller. It does have a in-app function that allows you to use an overlay for the buttons on the screen. I wasn't too successful in getting it to work the way that I want, but I have seen others do it. So maybe I'm just dumb and can't figure it out, but it does have that there if you want to use it. Moving on to the D-pad, I do wish that the D-pad was raised a little bit more off the controller and maybe even a little bit bigger. I do find that it is a little bit too close to the base of the controller itself, and I do wish that it was just a little bit wider. Outside of that, it's a fine D-pad. It works. It's very tactile, like I mentioned before. It's not mushy by any means. It's just, again, it could be a little bit bigger and a little bit higher off the controller itself. Initially, I wasn't a big fan of how clicky the shoulder buttons are, but those LR buttons, let me tell you something, they are phenomenal. Feeling the satisfaction you get when you click them and feel that click, chef's kiss. Now that's not to say that I don't wish that it did have triggers, because I do. I wish that there were triggers on this thing. Now moving on to the joysticks, they're fine. They're a little loose for my liking, but you know, that's completely my opinion. You might like it. I don't hate it, so to speak. I just wish that they were a little bit tighter, maybe had a little bit more resistance to them, but they are by no means bad joysticks. They're very serviceable, and you won't lose or win any games because of the joysticks. So over the last week, I've been trying to think of what would be the best case scenario, best case situation to be using this controller, and I've come up with 2 instances, maybe 3 technically if you want to look at it that way. But I see that the best instances to use this controller that I found would be if you're going to be doing either emulation for Nintendo DS or 3DS. I kind of count them as the same, even though they're 2 separate consoles. The other situation is Switch emulation from PC using Moonlight. I found that there is no noticeable input lag when using Moonlight on the same network. I haven't had a chance to use it outside of my home network, but if I'm in bed, I use this for Switch emulation from my PC because it's fantastic. There's no noticeable input lag. It looks like it's 1080p or 4K if you want to upscale it for some games. It's just the perfect situation for that Switch Pro that Nintendo won't give us. Leave a comment below if you'd like to see me drop a video on how to set up your Switch emulator and set up Moonlight to get it streaming to your device. Now, with it being good for DS and Switch emulation, that doesn't mean that it's only good for those. I do think that it will work fine for PlayStation, PlayStation 2, even Nintendo 64 and all those other consoles, Super Nintendo, yada yada yada. I just think that those are the 2 best situations for it because it doesn't have the triggers that would almost get in the way when playing Switch games sometimes, and it's just perfect for having reach to the screen for those Nintendo DS games that do require that second screen functionality. I could even see it being good for Wii U games as well if you wanted to maybe stream some of those games to your device. Overall, I do think that this is a good controller. I just think that the lack of triggers is a missed opportunity. The D-pad is something that I'm learning to live with, as I do think that it could be better. But objectively, I don't feel like that's something you should have to learn to live with, being that it is a $70 controller. But outside of that, I do think that it is otherwise a great controller, especially the clicky buttons, and I can't say enough about those shoulder buttons. So if you're someone who's going to be doing a lot of backlogging emulation for GameCube, or if you're going to be doing Xbox game streaming, I wouldn't say that this is the controller you should pick up. Otherwise, go for it. It works in most all situations except for those 2. Xbox because I can't seem to figure out how to switch the A and B buttons, and GameCube because there's no triggers. Otherwise, the controller has everything you need. If you need something for Super Nintendo, PlayStation, PlayStation 2, it's going to be great. It's going to work the way that it's supposed to. You're going to have 2 good joysticks, decent D-pad, very clicky buttons, super satisfying triggers to click on, and an overall great form factor. So yeah guys, those are my thoughts on the controller. Once again, the link is down in the description below. It was $70 when I picked it up, and there was actually a coupon to save $70, bringing it down to $62.99. So I think I got a pretty good deal for it. Tell me what you guys think about it if you purchased it. If you're still on the fence about it, tell me what's keeping you from buying it, guys. Hopefully this helps you make a decision on if you're going to pick it up, or if you're not going to. And hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.